Hello everyone. Welcome to the top 4 reasons to make the move to AutoCAD Electrical webcast. My name is Robert Brainerd, and today with us we have Caleb Funk and Tom Logar, both with Imaginate Technologies. I see we have lots of people in our audience today, and we have a wide array of attendees. I see titles including electrical controls engineers, controls managers, directors and VPs of engineering, some equipment and maintenance supervisors. Well, that's fantastic. I believe you're all in the right place, and I want to thank you for attending. Next slide, Caleb. Today we will be talking about 4 reasons to make the move to AutoCAD Electrical. The reasons are simply this: save time, reduce errors, save money, and impress your customers. We will be discussing some functionality that the tool provides in support of these 4 reasons, but that's only our opinion. I know what is more important to our audience today is your opinion. So to aid you in determining the value of AutoCAD Electrical for your application, I'd like to ask you to write these 4 reasons on a piece of paper. Go ahead, grab a sheet and jot them down. Again, write down save time, reduce errors, save money, and impress your customers. Leave some space between each of them. The idea is that when you see something that will help you save time, you can make a note of it. When you see something that will save you money, make a note of that. And if the feature will help you save time and help you reduce errors, make note of that appropriately. Easy enough, right? Okay, by the end of our hour today, you will likely have some good notes that will enable you to determine if these benefits can help you justify making the move to AutoCAD Electrical. And if this is something that needs to be approved, you'll already have a good portion of your justification and ROI written and ready to go. Do you see how we've saved you time already? Now, as I turn it over to our panel, I'd like to start by asking them, if our clients have not yet made the move to AutoCAD Electrical, how are they getting their work done today? What do you guys see out there in the field?
Well, Robert, I think we see a number of different methods that our clients are using. Probably the most common is, they may be using plain AutoCAD or even AutoCAD LT, and maybe they've created a library of their own blocks that they typically use. And sometimes they even go as far to write some custom routines for breaking lines and reconnecting lines and helping them tag their devices within their project, maybe even extracting a bill of material, if they've got attributes to those blocks. But they probably still don't have all the capabilities that we have in a tool like AutoCAD Electrical. Caleb, are you seeing anything different out there?
No, and even your description of mentioning going so far as to do that customization and put those pieces in, I would say that's fairly rare. Realistically, AutoCAD LT is a really common tool, of course AutoCAD, and it's generally a block library and maybe a couple of templates that have been set up to create this. I've really noticed that I've been doing this about 18 years working with the manufacturing products with Autodesk, and it seems like mechanical design gets a lot of love. There's 3D models, there's all these tools. We'll talk to departments, and they might have all kinds of different ways of creating models, additive manufacturing, CAM packages. And then on the electrical side, it's being done exactly the way it was, when I started 18 years ago, AutoCAD and some blocks.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We say that a lot, that VPs of engineering will give the mechanical designers the tools that they need, and they look at the electrical drawings and they say, oh, those are simple. They're just all 2D lines, arcs, and circles. What do they need anything more than AutoCAD for that? And, I think nothing could be farther from the truth. I think, when you look at the process in which the controls are designed, they're typically towards the end of the project after the mechanical design has been completed. And, if that machine can't ship out the door, it's probably being held up because of the controls engineers that can't get their job done fast enough. And, I think a tool like AutoCAD Electrical can really help them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those key things is the idea of, saving time, and it comes in a lot of different ways. And I've got, Tom, you can see my AutoCAD Electrical screen I've pulled up here?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so just as an idea, some of those tools where we can go through and save time, we mentioned things being done with arcs, lines, circles, and it's really common for that. In this case, I'm going to do a really common function that someone would be working with something like that, where I'm going to put in a ladder, but instead of putting it in with a, just drawing those lines and circles, nose pieces, I'm placing it in using a specific command for ladder. So this is, with AutoCAD Electrical, it's really, I'm using some of these ideas from AutoCAD, because what I end up with is some lines and some control point, some connection points and things like that, but it's just done in a much, much quicker way to create that rather than if I were to draw this, array it, or anything else that I would have.
And the other nice thing is, you basically place it in based on the standard that you've defined. So you don't have to worry about how much spacing you need in between your rungs. And, once that's all defined for you, it's done automatically. So it's really easy for people to follow that standard.
And I kind of went by that pretty quickly, but that's exactly right. I had some specific things already in here, such as my width, my spacing, reference numbers, different types of things like that. That's part of the reason it can go so quickly is that was already done beforehand.
And the other thing that I'd point out is, notice the line numbering that was done automatically for you. That's the kind of thing that, to pay an engineer to go through and modify line numbers is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and that line numbering is pretty important. It's more than just the text that we have there. For example, I'm going to go to my symbol library, and AutoCAD Electrical comes with a symbol library. We mentioned people are using a lot of blocks today. This is kind of along those lines, but they're a little smarter than just blocks that I might have. I'm just going to go ahead and place in this push button, and notice that it automatically calls it out as push button 741 because it knows I'm on line 741. So this information just gets fed right into it and can be placed in as part of that. If I were to, put in another component further down on another line, it would take that line information. So it's really an intelligent way to place some of this in.
And notice as Caleb places these devices on the wire, Electrical's smart enough to know that that's a wire and it's not a line. So it knows to break that wire and to connect it at the connection points for that device.
Yeah, it's some of those types of things where when I look at electrical, we talk about those four things. A big one for me is just the drafting tool itself. The fact that I've got a symbol library, it can break at these points automatically. I've got, I'm cleaning all this up, adding this in. It's also handling some other things in the background. You notice my text is a different color, so things are coming in on specific layers. Again, I've already set this up and told it what layers I want things to be, but it's just a way of kind of cleaning that information up and bringing it in a little more quickly than I could in another way. Going to drop one more ladder in over here. Sounds good. So yeah, the idea, one of the big ideas behind electrical, we mentioned the idea of being able to, these basic drafting tools, and I'm just going to add a few more of these in just to give kind of the audience an idea of what we're talking about. As I go along here and place this information in, so much is happening for me automatically. Connection points are being put in. And when I put in my rungs within there, I was just able to say, go from here to here. So all this information gets added in, placed in on specific layers, placed in on specific information right as we go through and set this up. So I've got my connection points, I've got all my information, automatically dropped right in there.
And the other nice thing that's happening as you're doing this, Caleb, is it's doing everything according to your company standard because you have it defined in that template. And I don't care who you are, every company has a standards problem. I ask engineering managers all the time, if I put my hand over the title block, can you just look at that drawing? Can you tell me who designed that? And they'll look at it and they'll say, yep, Bill did that one or Sally did that one. And they know because Sally does things a little bit different than Bill. And that's a standards problem. You should be able to cover up that title block and not be able to tell who did it. And the nice thing about AutoCAD Electrical is because so much of that is done for you it's harder to not follow the standard than it is to follow it.
Yeah, I started out on board drafting, and back then it was kind of a mark of, there's a point of pride that someone could tell your drawings from everyone else's. And it's interesting how that's changed how we went along, because then it became a point that if they can tell your drawing from anyone else's, you're not following the standards. You're not going through and doing the information the way that you should. So it's kind of, it's been interesting to see that change, but it definitely is important. Here, as I pull from this library, this is an example of some of those standards and some of that information that's being placed in. Standard symbols, text in standard locations, all of those types of things just following along with that. Now, speaking of standards, as I'm going along here, I'm creating this little circuit and putting this in place. I've got a very glaring error in here with the way that I wired it up. But I wanted to do that to kind of point out just a few of the tools we have available within electrical. Specifically, trim wire here. It's a pretty simple little tool, but it does a lot of things all at once. Now, before I do that, I can say this is AutoCAD. I can use erase, I can use trim, I can use those things. But because it's AutoCAD Electrical, I can come in and use trim wire, which automatically trims it back, removes connection points, cleans these different pieces up, and puts all of that in. And then there's a couple of ways I can get to that. I got it off of my menu here. I'm going to use another tool called Scoot that just allows me to come in and move this around a little bit. In this case, scooting this around, cleaning this up so that I get this information exactly where I need it to go. Scoot is great because it gives me it allows me to do a couple of things at once. I can move information, stretch it all at the same time, and it's just an idea of some of the tools that are built into AutoCAD Electrical.
And even the icons, the trim wire being wire cutters, it's built intelligently so that controls engineers know exactly what they should be using.
Absolutely. So, we're kind of talking about this idea of being able to quickly draw some of this up, and that's part of what I was going in and doing within here to get to this point. But another key piece of this isn't just the symbols that we have there, but the intelligence that's behind them. So I just kind of dropped this in. I went through and skipped by a lot of this very quickly. We'll say this is a start button, and that description will now appear as part of that. So I've got my component tag and a description. And I can even go further. I've got libraries of information that's available for this particular push button. So I can go pull a specific Allen Bradley part number and include that within here. I can even include a location and tell it where it's at in a particular project, so that now I've got location, my tag, as well as a description that's part of that. And you'll notice most of these have that included in there. So there's a lot of information being placed in as part of this.
And it's important to know that in the libraries, you have the ability when you install AutoCAD Electrical to specify the manufacturers that you want to install. I think if you installed them all, it would be like 65,000 symbols. But you might have specific vendors that you use for certain types of devices. You can limit that database so that if maybe they're long lead time items that you keep in stock in inventory, you might want to make sure that people are using those devices rather than specifying something new that would have to be purchased.
Yeah, and put that in there. So a couple other things that go along with that. And you can customize those libraries as well. It's always a question I get. Can we go through and set them up so that they appear, to be with what we need them to be? And you absolutely can. There's a couple other things that'll do for us as well that's pretty smart with how this goes together. I'm going to place in, I'd placed in a coil here earlier. I'm going to place in a normally open contact that's associated to that. And I'm going to go ahead and say this is the parent that I want associated to that. And it's going to add in some of that cross-referencing for me automatically. So it understands that here this one is, and it cross-references right back over to here. So it sees that information going back and forth and understands how those link to each other. And that linking is all pretty important with how we would begin to work with that and where that would go. I'm going to add in another one of those. I'm just going to put a normally open contact right here. And this time, and this is so smart with the way electrical works, you notice I have all the drawing list over here. Well, these are all part of a project. So it looks through my project, it looks through all my files that I have, and it finds any available coils that are within there. So this is going across drawings. It's not on the single drawing, it's actually working across the drawings, and it knows that this cross-references back to line 403. I'll just save this one and jump back to my other one. I'm also using that project just to jump back and forth between, and you notice I've got one normally open on 225 and one normally open on 404. So it understands how those coils and contacts cross-reference to each other.
Caleb, would it be a good time to show the surfer command?
Yeah, that's actually, it's exactly what I was thinking. So what's interesting is I've built this. Now I'm building this, interconnectedness, and it understands where this goes. And there's a whole variety of tools I can use. There's this one called Surfer. And Electrical was created by a controls engineer, and it has a little bit of a sense of humor. I've got tools like Scoot, and then I've got tools like Surfer, things like that. But what Surfer allows me to do is I can look at the parent, or I can see how it cross-references to all the other components I have on here. So I can really quickly surf right over to the other component that I have in place here. Actually, I'm going to scoot this one over a little bit just so it's out of the way. So I can surf right over to this one, or if I'm on that component, I can go the same way. I can surf to any of the related pieces that are for that. In this case, I'll jump right back to the parent. So it allows me to surf back and forth between those, and I can see the different pieces, understand how they link together. I could actually follow, the cross-references right through a drawing to understand where those pieces come in. I'm going to throw out just another couple other quick things. We talked about the idea of those four things that we're looking at, and a key one to me is not just doing these drawings quicker, but being able to have this intelligence that's available within them. And I'll give you an example of that. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to place one more normally open contact, and it wouldn't go here, but I just want to place it in for two reasons. One, it's kind of cool that it turns automatically to go with that. But as I go pick this, I'm going to go back to this coil and say, yep, I want one more. It says, wait a minute, you already have two. And I actually picked a catalog number earlier that says I can only have two normally open contacts. And it says, what do you want to do? So I'm just going to cancel out. But I could ignore the limit, make some catalog changes. Now I'm ignoring the limit at my own peril. It's already stopped me once, but I could say, nope, go ahead. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cancel out of that. But that gives you some idea of how it understands what's already being used. The same would be true if I tried to put in another push button right over here. And notice this is 403B. If I tried to make it 403, it would say, hey, wait a minute, 403 has already been used. So it's going to kind of put the brakes on there for me just for a second so I can understand, hey, there's some intelligence built into this where it understands what's already being used, how these reference together, and that's going to keep me from making those kinds of errors within there.
Yeah, that real-time air checking is important. And a lot of times we do have clients that ask us, well, can I design something that is electrically incorrect? And, the answer is yes. The software is not going to help you from doing that, but it is going to give you some pointers as to some of these things that you may need to, have documented properly. But you absolutely could design a panel that'll blow up on you.
Right. So yes, there's that human element absolutely has to be there, but that idea of reducing errors with this type of intelligence that's into it is very, very powerful for what we're working with. I'm going to jump back to this ladder set over here. One other piece that I wanted to kind of pull in here, I was working with individual components, and I'm placing in these individual pieces, which is absolutely, really powerful. We can go with that. But I'm going to insert a PLC card into here. And I only have this set of manufacturers loaded. So this will give you some idea what, Tom was talking about earlier, going through, and you can see the different components, the different manufacturers that are going in here. We can see all this information. I'm going to go ahead and grab a card number for my Allen Bradley set here, and I'm going to add this to this particular drawing set. So I'm just going to grab my first line. Now I'm going to insert all of it, so I'm going to go ahead with the whole thing. and I'm going to give it a rack and slot number, so this will be rack 2, slot 3, let's say. And then I'll give it just a beginning list for that. So this is able to go through, take my information that I have here, and then begin working with that. Oh, and I picked the wrong one for the top there, so I'm just going to trim that wire, clean that part up. We'll come back and clean this piece up. So by doing this, we're able to take this, begin working with it, set it up. I'll do just a quick connection there. We can see that it takes the information, puts it in, drops it all on there, connects all the points, puts all those components in. So I can be that PLC, not only do I have the library, but I can begin assigning all this different information to the addresses and all of those different pieces that I have in there. So this is definitely a way of speeding up working with PLC, drawing creation, and putting that type of information in.
And all the appropriate tagging in there.
Absolutely.
That's nice, yeah.
Got all my addresses.
How about renumber? Can you talk to that for a little bit?
Yeah, let's take a look at a couple different ways that we can work with renumbering, because you'd mentioned at the top the idea of going through and putting in, whether it's dealing with wiring numbers or whatever it would be. That's a lot of times that is something that's just time-consuming. One of the most common ways I see things numbered is just a piece of text that gets copied, and if we have to renumber a drawing, then you literally have to go through and change the text in all these places. Before I renumber it, I'm actually going to drop some numbers on here real quick. So I put in these wires, these components, these rungs. I placed them in separately. So I don't have any information on there right now. Well, what I'm going to do is I'll do some wire numbers, and I'm just going to go pick the wires that I want to wire number. So I'll grab these, and it looks at the network that I have available, and you notice that it's dropping on the wire number, so it knows that this is 403, and then these are just branches off of it, so we really didn't have to do a whole lot to make that happen. But it drops in my 403 automatically, calls out my information, it knows where that's at. So this wire number got placed in based off of my current settings, what my rungs are, where my information is, all of those different sorts of things that I have within there. So it's also based off of certain settings that I have as part of this. So if I take a look at this, I'm calling out my wire numbers, and it's just the number of wherever it's at. And I'm going to change that. I'm going to set my settings to, let's see, we'll go with, and I'm using a kind of a trick here, so it's the page number that I'm coming up with as well. So it's the wire number and the ladder number and the page number is what the wire number is going to become as we go through there. I'm going to say, okay, sounds good. And then I'm going to rewire this one. I'm going to tag everything, and I'm just going to do it for this whole drawing. So now it's going to run through my whole set. Oh, I picked the wrong one. I picked the wrong characters I put in there. I did put in the -P, but I didn't put in my page number. So it goes through, and you notice how quickly it renumbered everything that I have associated to that. Puts all that information in there. I'll just set it up like this real quick. We'll take that, and I'll cross-reference it. So that is, there's my problem. Put the percent in the wrong place. Rookie mistake. So if I do my wire numbers and I retag them all, I'm just going to do this drawing. I didn't put in a page number yet. So I've got my dash, I've got my information. It begins to drop all of that in, and the renumbering is almost instant. Now, not only can I do this on this one, but I can do it on a whole project as I go through. So as I run through and put that information, I can take care of that entire set all at once as we go through there.
I mean, we talk to clients that have projects that are 400 pages or 800 pages. I could not imagine having to renumber that kind of stuff manually.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So, and I'll go ahead and run this again. Now that I've actually got my right number in there. So now we see it as 4064, 4064A. It's calling the information out based off of the page number that we're on. And interestingly enough, we can go through, you're talking about having 400 drawings. If I add one or if I adjust one, if the sheet number changes, I'm going to make this sheet number 14 just for fun. Now I can go through and run that wire numbering again, just on the whole project based off of that new sheet number that I've given it, and everything updates accordingly. So it's absolutely tremendous, the way that the renumbering and the information works with that. It's such a time saver. The idea of going through a whole drawing, doing search and replace on text or anything like that, wouldn't even want to think about it.
And you know that you didn't miss anything because it was done automatically for you.
Yeah, the idea of reducing errors is pretty significant when I don't have to, go through and make sure I've gotten every single one. I'm changing it to a 14. It's a significant change. There's a lot of places for error. So the fact that this is going to take care of that for me is, pretty significant.
So I think we've seen a lot of ways that AutoCAD Electrical makes designing in a controlled environment faster, easier, reduces errors, does some of that checking along the way, follows your company standard. But the other thing that we're doing is as we're building this, we're building in so much intelligence to this project that we can do some data reporting. Caleb, do you want to talk a little bit about the type of reports that we can do?
Yeah, and there's a lot. So, and I just for a quick moment, I'll talk about, you notice I've been working with schematic up to this point, and I've had all these schematic tools where I can place this information in. I'm going to go ahead and change to a reporting area that I can come with. So I'm going to be here with, I've got reports that I can start generating, and I've got some schematic reports, and we'll talk in a little bit about panel reports that I can generate. So I'm going to generate some schematic reports. And there's all kinds of different ones that I can do. In this case, I'm going to take a look at this active drawing, and I'm going to say I want to look for, let's call it a bill of material report. So it's going to look through this whole drawing, and it's going to pull out some basic information for me. It's grabbing the tags, total quantity, and then what catalog number goes on with those. So I know on these tags, I need 4 of these Allen Bradley catalog numbers. These are coils that I have here. And then I've got some limit switches, and I've got 3 of this type of limit switch and 3 of this type of limit switch. And then I take a look down here, and I've got some lights with some information, and I continue on, and here's that push button that I placed in, its catalog number, and the description for that from the catalog. Now, so I've been able to extract this pretty quickly, and then I've got some options with what I want to do. I can just drop it on the drawing, or really commonly what I would do with this is I would save it out to a file format, whether it's Excel or Access or XML, whatever type that would be. Typically, Excel is super common. I'm just going to go ahead and kick this out so that I've got an Excel file with that information here on my desktop, and I can, yeah, I've done this once or twice before. And so I can kick that Excel information out. And now that's something I could just hand off to purchasing. I could give to someone else within the company that they need to take a look at, however I would want to access that and work with it.
We even have some clients that they formulate those reports in the right way so that they could be imported directly into their ERP or MRP system just to save time and, re-entry information into that other system.
Yeah, and another real interesting report, you were talking about how I mentioned how a lot of times I see things done in AutoCAD exactly the way they've been done for a while. There's certain things people have wanted for a while and it's been difficult with AutoCAD, and one of them is the idea of a from-to list, the idea of where did, a wiring printout, where something runs from where to where does this information go? And I'll take a look, I'll look at the whole project this time. I'm going to look throughout the whole project, and I'm going to do a from-to report. And what I can do with this, I'm going to say, okay, sounds good. And I can determine which drawings I want to look at, and I'm just going to look at all of them. We'll say get all of them. And then when I put my component in, I gave it a location. I said I want to look, it's going into operator station 3. So I'm going to run a report for everything that runs from operator station 3, we'll say to the junction box and to the cabinet. And then what happens is it goes through and pulls out a report and can tell me wire 224 in operator station 3 from light 225 goes to the cabinet and gets wired into light 230. It's a white 16-gauge wire. And here we've got wire 309, where it's wired to, and on and on and on. So I can see how all of these go together Here's my 14 wire numbers that I have, even down to the pin number, to the component, and in the particular wire that it's going with. And Tom, this is something that I know a lot of people have wanted to do, but it's proved difficult to get to this level of information.
You know, I've been asking that question to clients for over 20 years. You know, do you ever create a from-to list or a point-to-point list? And I think I've only gotten a yes maybe 4 or 5 times. And when I ask why they don't do it, they say, well, we simply don't have time. You know, at the end of our project, you know,
Sure.
That would be something that we don't have time to do. Well, you know, if you could do it as quick as Caleb just did, and it's just a push of a couple of buttons, why wouldn't you include that along with your drawing packet? You know, if you sell your client a machine and, you know, they're trying to figure out how something's wired up, and if they could pull up that report and figure out where things go to, maybe that prevents one more warranty call or a call into your engineers, you know, to ask them how things are wired up. So I think it's a free thing that you might as well do.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and that's something, you know, it definitely can impress customers, you know, when we're handing them that much more additional information without including, you know, a big increment in cost. Because it is, once we've built this up, once this is here, it's something we can extract pretty easily from that to be able to pull that out. I'm going to jump across. So we've been talking about the idea of schematics, and we've looked at some schematic reports and some other pieces associated with that. I'm going to kind of pull that idea of reports here a little bit, but I want to take a look at the panel side. So I've got a couple different panels I can kind of talk through here, but one of them we're kind of looking at the back of the panel, how these pieces come together, and here we're looking at the location of some different controls on that operator station. So I've been talking about operator station 3, and here it is. I'll work with it from here. A couple of really cool things I think that are smart here. So I definitely have symbols, right? We've got these basic symbols that we have in place. The way that I get to do those and is pretty important. I actually get to, it's almost like those reports we just saw. I'm going to go through and I'm going to look throughout my whole system that I have here for anything located in Operator Station 3. So I'm looking through my whole project to find anything that's in Operator Station 3. And it runs a quick report to look what's there, to find that information. And now I can, these are components that go into Operation 3 that have not been put on a panel. Now, M403 placed in earlier. I went through and called it out. It's not on the panel. I'm going to go ahead and insert that. And if I have a specific catalog number, this was able to go through, look at that catalog information, add it to it, pull out what that component looks like for the library, and I've got that automatically placed with the information directly from a footprint library that we have. So I've got the physical representation and the schematic representation of that placed in there.
And, you know, without having a tool like that, you know, you'd have to either know the size of that device or, you know, look at a spec sheet from the manufacturer just to have an idea of what that physical representation would be. Yeah,
absolutely. I also put it in here, I just for my own, just to kind of show this off a little bit, I put it in here very wrong, right? You know, I've got a system, I've got a grid, I've got these things lined up, and I just threw that one way off there in space. And I did that. I just want to use some of the really simple tools. Again, I'm doing this right-click where I can come along and begin doing, I'm going to just align that vertically here, going this way, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here horizontally. So just the number of tools that are available to you to really quickly lay this type of thing out is really important and really useful for setting all of that up. So I'm going to place just a couple other quick things. What I did is I went to a list and something in. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to put in a nameplate. And I'm going to go here and look at my catalog, 800T. And I'm going to play 800, you know, look at all the 800Ts I have there. And I'm just going to grab one of those. That sounds great. And the way nameplates work is it uses a specific symbol once I select that, it ties it to it. So you can see it pulls the information in, and I called that system start, and sure enough, it's calling it out as system start and places that right in there with the component that I have. So my nameplate, all my information get placed in, and I can control a lot of different things in here. For instance, I don't need to see that that's 403. We can turn that off, and then I can rearrange where some of these different pieces are as part of that. So I'll just move a couple of these around so I can get them quite where I want them to be. Now, Tom mentioned the surfer earlier, and that holds true here as well. So this nameplate, this component that I have here, and my original are all linked together. That is system start. We'll just call this mission start. Where there's a small name change. And what happens is it's going to go over, and it will be quick. Look, I had just a moment ago.
Hey, Caleb, your line is breaking up just a little bit. Would you be able to try to dial in from a different line?
I'm probably. Thanks for letting me know. Has it been breaking up the whole time?
Yeah, just for the past couple minutes. It keeps going in and out.
No problem. So I'm going to dial in from a different line. So give me just a second.
Okay, great.
So the panel layout, I think, is it's got a lot of nice tools in that it references the schematic and it knows all the devices that you've placed and all the ones that you need to place so that you don't forget to put something in the panel, and keeps track of that as you go along. You know, it also gives you that visual representation of how this thing's going to be laid out and helps you make decisions in terms of, you know, if I have maybe a couple of devices that are next to each other that might get hot, you know, I might want to space those out differently, or I might want to add a cooling fan. You know, you can make decisions based on that just because you're visually understanding how it's all going to come together. That's a pretty nice tool.
Yeah, it is. So I'm going to try and dial on there.
I do see a couple of questions here in the panel. One is, can we add our own company part numbers in the catalog? Yes, you can. You can do that. You can choose to display whatever you want in the bill of materials. So even if the manufacturer's part number is still in there, you can choose not to display it and display your own part number if you prefer. Some companies like to put a multiplier in there as well. You know, for certain devices, you can do that if you need to as well.
Okay, Tom, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound better. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Cool. All right. So one other thing I want to do here within the panel. So I've got in this information. We talked about those reports just a little bit ago. And I've seen a lot of different bill of material reports generated from drawings, just from, you know, working with different, whether it's a schematic or whether it's a panel. And usually it involves going through and taking a highlighter and marking each piece off and putting it into an Excel spreadsheet. And you print them out, you mark them off, and you make sure you've got everything. In this case, I'm going to do a report, so I'm going to use my report information. And I'm going to go to my panel report that I have here, and I'm just going to do a bill of material report for this drawing. So kind of like what we saw earlier, there is one difference in that I didn't point it out when I was putting these in. These have an item number. So I can associate item numbers to this. So a panel bill of material is going to be a little bit different. It's calling out item numbers. It's calling out all this information associated to this. And before, what we did is I went ahead and just saved it out to a file, so I could have an Excel file. I could have something like that. In this case, I'm going to put it on the drawing. Now, I already have one here, so what it's going to do, it's going to update it. And since I've added some components, it's going to be a little too long for what I have here. No, excuse me. So I'm able to update it to my original position. So I'm able to update it, pull it over to this position, add in my new components. There's my my catalog information for those pieces, all of it gets updated and put into place as part of that. So I don't have to worry about counting each of these up and understanding where they're at. That's going to happen automatically as I generate that report. It's just going to pull that information in.
And your balloons there, those are associative to the bill of material?
Yeah, absolutely. So whatever my part number is for my component, that's going to be the part number for the balloon as it comes out. And again, here off my panel, I've got specific tools for creating balloons and putting some of that information in. So when I place it in, whatever item number this is the item number it becomes in the balloon. So that's item number 11, item number 11 right here. So all of it does link together. We've got the item numbers, got the information associated to it. All of it is, as I change one, it changes in multiple places. And that way, as I link that information, it all comes together pretty much. You know, it's one of those things where it's just so useful to be able to have that linked and have all of that information together as part of it. And I'm going to go here and just make a quick change. We'll take that and we'll call it 20. So if that becomes item 20, oh, it's warning me it's already being used on a different component. Look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out. Let's just go ahead and make it 50 because I know 50 is not used. And I'll say, okay, sounds good. Yep. Go ahead and update. Updates my drawing, updates my information. Again, all the links are held together through the idea of this piece is represented on my schematic, it's linked to this, my nameplate, and then I have the number associated to that so that I can see all of that coming together.
Kev, do you want to talk just a little bit more about projects? You know, you're working in multiple drawings here, you're making multiple changes, and AutoCAD Electrical is tracking all those changes and saving everything appropriately. Do you want to talk about how that all happens?
Yeah, and it's a really big part of AutoCAD Electrical. So the way that that comes together is I've created here a project, and really all this is it's a really small file that AutoCAD Electrical uses to understand what drawings are part of this project. So it knows that all of these drawings are part of this. I've got it broken down here into schematic and panel, and I've got one sitting kind of outside of those. You don't have to do that. It makes it pretty easy to understand where they're at. It doesn't change what folder they're sitting in. It doesn't change any of that. But it takes these drawings and allows me to link them together. So much of what I do has to do with a project. When I run those reports that I just ran, I have the option always to run them on the project, which is the entire set of drawings, or I can run it on just the active drawing. The project can be used for a lot of different things. For instance, here, you notice I've got some sheet information, but it's not filled in yet. At a project level, I can go through and update my title blocks, let's say. So I'm going to go through and say, well, let's take in the sheet information, and I want to fill in the sheet number. So I know it's sheet. We'll fill in the sheet number and give it a sheet maximum. I'm going to say, yep, do all my drawings. Just run through and grab all of them so that you'll see it really quickly here, scan through those drawings, and now it says 8 of 11. So the sheet number's been updated with that information because I've added, you know, if I've added a drawing or removed a drawing, I can give it my sheet information, and as it goes through, it'll take that, update it, and push all of that right out there. Matter of fact, this one, if you'd recall, I renumbered it specifically to make it show up so I had different numbers in my lines, and there we have, it's calling it out as 14. I mean, really it's 4, but it calls it out and understands that. And it ran through the whole project to update that information so quickly. And that's something I've seen a lot of people where they'll have sheets and it'll say, you know, to renumber them if they have to remove one or add one, it's just a pain because now they're out of sequence, and how do we set that up? You know, the idea of a project allows me to keep all that together and run through that very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a key element, and I think, you know, I think everything that we've talked about here today is some really powerful features, you know, and if I think about somebody that's not using AutoCAD Electrical, that's using a library of symbols that they've created, I mean, there's so much that they're missing out on. that a tool like Electrical provides. And the nice thing is it's AutoCAD. You know, so if you know AutoCAD, you know the fundamentals of how the system works. There's just some advanced tools that Electrical has that, you know, make that process much smoother for doing controls design.
Yeah, everything that I've really done, you know, the ladders, everything, ladders, wires, they're lines on specific layers. All of my symbols are just AutoCAD blocks with attributes. Even down here to my title block that gets updated automatically, it's an AutoCAD block with attributes. So much of it is familiar. You know, as we go in and take a look at it, it's tools you've been using forever. It's just this idea of extending what they can do and putting it together in a really smart way to do those things that we described earlier, where you can do drawings faster, you can reduce errors, you can save money, and you can impress your customers.
Great. So Robert, at the beginning of the presentation here, you created a list of 4 reasons, and you've been taking some notes. How do those notes look to you?
Well, Tom, I've actually taken a lot of great notes and can really see a pretty substantial return on investment for a tool like AutoCAD Electrical. I trust our audience also took some good notes and was able to see how AutoCAD Electrical would help them in some pretty significant ways too. I do want to mention one other thing, and that is that many of our attendees on this call may qualify for a free upgrade that will include AutoCAD Electrical. And for those that don't qualify for the free upgrade, there are some very inexpensive paths to get access to this tool. So I would encourage all of you to reach out to your Imagineit account representative or visit our website at imagineit.com to find out the best path for you. I certainly appreciate all of your time, and I trust this information was valuable. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Cassie, and she can open it up for Q&A. Cassie?